There'll be days like this when you don't meet a chancer. There'll be days like this.
With you with Wakes, we being Danny Murphy, Bob Mills and myself, Jim White. Reports coming in at the moment, and we're getting this checked out. Unconfirmed as yet, but Frank de Boer sacked as manager of Crystal Palace after just 4 games in charge in the Premier League. Ben's out at the correspondence desk. And Ben, what are they saying out there? I can imagine.
Very fluid, very rapidly moving situation, Jim. Mark Hall says the idea someone can get sacked 4 games into the new job is vile. As for who you'd rather have in charge, Roy Hodgson or Frank de Boer, Daniel Assel says, how can anyone vote for Roy Hodgson? Most useless waste of space manager going. So bland. Binman Chris has given us a third option. He'd like to see Paul Chuckle have a run of things. Tom Evans has a really big solution. He says disband the club. Zed says different types of managers suit different teams. Pep, Zidane, Klopp, etc. would probably all struggle there too. It doesn't make them bad. And Luke Newsom says only one man can save Palace now, and he's tweeted a picture of Mike Bassett, England manager.
Ben, thank you very much indeed. I mean, Bob,
more wasted 2 minutes that was.
4 matches in charge in the Premier League. I mean, I have to say, when you look at the back page of the Times this morning, I must admit, it shows us where we're at. When Alan Smith tells us Frank de Boer admitted last night he doesn't know if he'll still be in charge of Palace when they play Southampton on Saturday. Well, now we do know, because this is gathering pace at the moment, that de Boer has gone at Crystal Palace. And
we get stuck into today. Luckily, we have the former owner of Crystal Palace, Simon Jordan, is on the phone. Matt Holland will be bringing some football knowledge to the matter as well. And we'll be joined by, just a whole lot of fantastic guests to discuss not just the idea that Crystal Palace could sack a manager after 360 minutes of football, but the whole idea that English football is now in such a place that that's how we work. All of that coming up in kick-off. We'll also talk about Everton, Sadio Mane and much else besides. But that was how we'll start. Crystal Palace, are they making mugs of themselves, or just ensuring that they survive in the Premier League? That'll be kick-off starting in a few minutes' time. 77 days, 360 minutes of actual Premier League football. He's gone.
We've been in the bottom 3, I think, 2 seasons running for home form. Sooner or later, that's going to catch up with us. You know, we got away with it last year, make no mistake. We need to build a cushion, and Frank's number one brief is to reduce mine and the supporters' anxiety. You know, that's really what we need to do.
Michael Oliver looks at his watch. Burnley have won, but for the first time in Premier League history, a team has lost their first 4 games of the season without scoring a single goal. They've got decisions to make in the Palace boardroom over the next week or so.
I'm looking for always to the positive way. You know, I want to, if I leave, I want to leave to the front door and not to the back door. And they always can say afterwards, he did, you know, everything in his possibility to give always 100%. I think I do that, then I will show the quality that I have.
360 minutes of actual Premier League football. I have sat through longer guitar solos than that, and Frank de Boer has been sacked by Crystal Palace. Are the club making mugs of themselves with changing the horses so early in the season, or do they have to do what they have to do to ensure their Premier League survival? I'll introduce my guests in a second. We want to hear from you as well. 08717 22 3344. We're here from Crystal Palace fans. Is this the right thing, and is Roy Hodgson the right replacement? 08717 22 3344. And wider than this, we'll talk about this for the next hour and a half in many different ways. Is this English football finally gone mad? 4 games. We've crossed a new Rubicon here. I remember when Spurs sacked Jacques Santini after 11. People were shocked. 11? It's a lifetime now if you're not doing well as the fans and the chairman think you should be. 08717 22 3344. This is the Monday night kickoff. I'm Danny Kelly, and we happen to have the perfect lineup for us today. Alongside me, as so often these days, the former owner, chairman and fan of Crystal Palace, Simon Jordan. Evening, Simon.
Danny, lovely to see you back, my esteemed colleague.
Thank you. Sorry to hear you've got so little to say about this, Simon. It's a shame. And with him, perhaps to bring a little bit of professional decorum, but maybe not. We shall see to the proceedings. The former Ipswich Town and Republic of Ireland legend, of course, Matt Holland. Hi, Matt.
Good evening, Danny. Hoping to get a word in edgeways here.
Oh, I think you'll stand your own, won't you? Absolutely. And Neil Ashton, of course, who is a very high-profile Crystal Palace fan, you know, one of the highest paid and most respected journalists in the world of football. So he'll be coming in We rang him to say, can you come on the phone? He said, actually, I'm in town. I want to come and have a word about this as well. So let me, I'll put it out to the listeners there. I'll start with you, actually, Matt, because Simon coming off his long run-up. Crystal Palace, 4 games in. All right, 4 very poor games and no points and no goals. They've sacked a manager who they presumably moved heaven and earth and money to get in the summer. Are they mugs for doing this? What is this? Well, the decision to get rid of him after 4 games, right or wrong for you?
I'd say he needed longer. I personally would have liked him to have got longer.
And that's a very sensible thing to say. Simon, we are interested bystanders, very interested bystanders. We love football, Matt and I. You poured your heart, your soul, your emotion, your father's legacy and your own dough into that football club. You love the club. What have you made the last 24 hours?
Well, I mean, Danny, we spoke about this on a number of occasions over the summer about my vantage point on De Boer and him coming in and the qualification for managing in the Premier League. And the fact that the Eredivisie is a big jump, the Premier League is a big jump from the Eredivisie. Now, you look at the scenario and say, they knew that they brought a manager in that didn't have any Premier League experience. So 4 games into that tenure, and let's look at those 4 games without waxing too lyrical. Huddersfield had a free hit at Palace because that's a game that Huddersfield could only do well in because they've just come up. They're full of, as Bilic says, full of promotion further for his game this evening. So that was a free hit for Huddersfield, and Palace were a little bit slow out of the blocks. Liverpool away, well, okay, 1-0 away to Liverpool's not a bad one.
Anyone can lose at Anfield.
Swansea is a bad one at home. But Burnley yesterday, you look at the setup, whether they go long ball, whatever they play the game that's in front of them. 65% possession, 38 crosses, 18 shots on goal, 2 cleared off the line. Burnley absolutely dominated, and just a little bit of luck. But I look at that situation and say, this is not a football decision. This is a culture decision.
What do you mean by that, Simon?
By that I mean that the point I made about him coming in having no Premier League experience and then being judged as if you're, like I said to you off air, it's like getting a one-legged man to run 100 metres, expecting him to do it in 10 seconds and then telling him off for not doing it. You know he can't do it. So you know this man can't garner and gain enough Premier League experience in 4 games. The cultural point I mean is that when you see something, I know there are players in that Crystal Palace dressing room that have the ear of the chairman, that will be talking to the chairman about what they do and don't like or what they will and won't have. Right? And De Boer has come in there and made statements about the way he wanted them to play without understanding the personnel that are there. And I think Parish is looking at this and going, well, I was indulged by my owners to be able to have a flight of fancy about someone I thought on paper stacked up. And I'm looking at it now and thinking 4 games in, I'm not sure this is going to get any better, not because he's not capable of managing at this level, but because culturally he hasn't grasped it.
I don't expect you to know the exact ins and outs because you are an outsider looking in, although a privileged one. Crystal Palace have got owners in America. They've got Steve Parish, who was you, but now is a highly paid employee of the club with those owners. They've got a director of football recently appointed in the form of Doogie Friedman, legend at the club, of course.
I know very well.
Right. How are these decisions being made, and is that setup itself a cause of tension?
Well, is it a cause of tension? No, I think, the Americans, when we spoke in the summer, I said to you again, right, without wanting to be, I said, he said, she said.
I'll remind you of the other things you said that were wrong as well, don't worry.
There's very few of those. But in this instance, right, we're talking about the scenario of looking at what Parish was allowed to do, because I felt that he should have gone a different route with an established Premier League manager. And the fact that he was allowed to do that and has reacted quickly is I think, is also a strength. I won't say too many complimentary things about Parish, but he's got most of the decisions that he's made at management level right, with Pulis, Pardew and Allardyce. He took it off on a tangent, but if you see something that's wrong and you believe that, whether it's 4 games or 14 games or whether we've gone across a new threshold of football ridiculousness, from £200 million transfers down to 4 games.
That may be a coincidence though, because if you're right saying, I think what you're going to say is, if you see something is wrong and you don't think it's going to improve, whether you're running a chip shop in High Street, your local village, or a huge company, or a football club, you cannot sit there with the proof in front of you, if you believe it in your heart and your mind, going, I'll just wish for the next couple of weeks this will improve. It doesn't improve. It gets worse, doesn't it? Things don't improve.
You have to make things happen, but sometimes sometimes things take their natural course. I would have thought that Palace would have had a decent result against Southampton next week on the back of that performance against Burnley, and then they were running into Manchester United, Liverpool and Chelsea, which was always going to be difficult. I think the decision was made. I think it was made before this game. I don't think anything other than a resounding tanking of Burnley might not have saved him anyway.
And I got that impression as well from the way that the players were playing. But in that case, Matt, why does he go on on social media? And I know we have a difference, but I think everyone has to be on social media. That's the way the modern world is. It's like going out without shoes now if you're not on.
I've got to be honest.
Right,
if I was a player, I wouldn't be on social media. I actually would not be on social media because 90% of it would be negative anyway, and you don't want to be reading negative stuff.
You don't have to believe just because someone says something negative. You don't have to believe it, man.
No, but
you're talking about the chairman going on Twitter.
Yes,
now,
I am.
Yeah.
And if the decision had already been made, why did he half back the manager on Saturday night?
Well, exactly. That's why it seems to me that it's more results based on Sunday against Burnley because it looked as though he wanted to keep with De Boer. He was written on social media.
He is, very, very committed to his manager's parish. His dancing partner was Pardew, and he kept him there far longer than perhaps Pardew even wanted to be kept himself.
Yes. Chained to the radiator.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at this, and there's not. And I had a long conversation with our producer Luke whilst he was in bed this morning, half asleep, about the machinations of a chairman's mind. And there's nothing that you can look at in that performance and say, I need to take this guy out.
Can I ask you, as a chairman, did you speak to senior players?
No.
And get their opinion on what was going right, what was going wrong, etc. I've been in a dressing room where it's exact same thing has happened, where a manager's taken over. In Les Reed, I'm talking about now. 7 games in charge of a Premier League club. I was at Charlton.
Lifetime now. Looks like a lifetime. 7 games.
Forever, isn't it?
Yeah.
But how much more time do you want to get it right?
Tell us what happened with Les Reed.
Again, senior players were in the ear of the chairman,
including yourself.
I don't want your opinion. I want the manager's opinion. You work for the manager, right? And with due respect, my champion is my manager, and his champions are in his dressing room. I don't want your opinion. I don't want to hear from you. I want you to do your job. So I want the manager to manage you.
So you never had contact with the
No, I didn't want it. I had opportunities to have it, and I would have to pass the time of day with the captain and pass the day. My job was to walk in at the first game of the season and say, lads, you fancy this season? Because I do. Let's go for it. By the way, here's your manager. See you at the end of the season. That was my relationship with the players.
Never went in the dressing room after games?
I went in the dressing room once when I was in the club for about 2 months, went in there and completely undermined the manager by giving the players exactly what I thought of them, and what I might have done is got the manager's coat, because I was doing his job.
Listen, okay, that's the opening salvo. So there is a lot to this. Were Palace right to appoint De Boer, so different from the gnarled English Premier League manager they've done so well with over the past 10 years? That's the first question. Were they right then to sack the bloke when he hasn't really had a chance to get anything going at Crystal Palace? And are we in English football now got to a place where 4 games without a win and you will get the chop? 08717 22 33 44. We're joyous enough to have a former owner and chairman of Crystal Palace in the room. And now we're joined by Britain's leading football journalist, Neil Ashton from The Sun, who happens to be a Palace fan, but I don't suppose that's helped much today. How has this day unfolded for you, Neil? Because when people I was on the air both Saturday and Sunday, people said, they'll sack De Boer. Even I, cynical that I am about English football, I just thought, no, 4 games, that's not going to happen.
No, I have to say, after the defeat against Swansea just before the international break, so that's about August the 26th, 27th, so they lost at home against Swansea, I thought then that he would not see out the international break. I really believed that Steve Parish would make the decision and say, okay, it's a mistake.
3 games,
but that's what I thought at the time.
Yeah,
that was my kind of reading of a situation, that they just wouldn't wait. That my interpretation would be, okay, they'll just get this done. They've made a mistake. They accept they've made a mistake for whatever reason, because we can go back and we can look at Frank de Boer's history and we say what a great player he is and a gilded player, and the 4 Eredivisie titles he won with Ajax. We can say, that's fine, that's great, and it looks good on his CV. But the fact is that Palace are in a results business. They are in a relegation battle every season. Whatever their ambitions are, however lofty they are, the facts are that the teams outside the top 6 clubs in this country are automatically placed in a relegation battle and plunged headlong into a situation every single season where they cannot afford to get relegated, don't want to get relegated, and financially can't afford to get relegated. So after 3 games, I believe then that he would go. Stay of execution, a slight improvement, change in formation yesterday at Turf Moor.
They were better, weren't they?
But yeah, so okay. So when you, but actually, when you okay, so everyone says, okay, let's have a period of reflection. So the 2 weeks, the international break, the owners of the club, Frank de Boer, the players, have got a period of introspection and reflection. So everybody has that, don't they? There's a little bit of breathing space but before the next game. So when you all agree that, yeah, we're going to stick together, we're going to do it for the manager, we're going to put 110% in, and we'll do everything we can to save this guy's job, we'll change the formation, and yeah, we're all behind Frank, we'll all rally round behind him, we want him to stay, we want this long-term vision to develop. Oh, and then you lose again, despite an improved performance, despite changing the formation, despite everything that you've said before the game. Where does that actually leave you?
Let me ask you a question. Do you think that was already a done deal, or if Scott Dan's header goes in from 2 yards, which it ought to, would we be having this conversation now?
Perhaps if it had, but that's if your auntie was your uncle kind of conversation, isn't it? But I would only imagine that Steve Parish slept on it. It's not an easy decision to make, is it? The guys.
You from the outset, you've said after 3 games, your expectation, your anticipation, and your belief was that they were going to make this decision. So you then can't have it on the other way, which is that, irrespective of the result yesterday, that Parish may not have made his mind up. They've even made their mind up. The performance yesterday, unequivocally, was the best performance they've put in all season. As a former owner of a football club, if I'm looking down on that, I'm the most qualified person to say this in this room, if I'm looking down at that, I'm not firing that manager. So go back to the point that you made, and more interestingly for me is, journalistically, why would you have assumed that after 3 games there was something that you picked up that made you believe that Parish was going to pull the trigger?
Oh, well, I didn't assume. I didn't pluck it from thin air. I was in a position where I believed that's what was probably about. That was probably about to happen.
Had you spoken to anyone else who also believed that? If I might ask you the question that way.
Well, we all have conversations with people who work in the game. So, look, are we saying to me who told? Is the question who told you that? Well, sorry guys, I'm not going to answer.
No, the question wasn't. The question was, did somebody tell you that?
Well, I wouldn't have written it otherwise. All
right, fine. What about the weekend's Twitter activity? When I was at 10 o'clock last night, the 2 mics came in here. They were reading Steve Parish's tweets,
yeah.
And one of them interpreted it as, "Oh, he's definitely going now," and the other one interpreted it as, "No, he's definitely staying." Has that been helpful?
My interpretation of the tweets last night when I was scanning through there was when it was sort of all the drama was unfolding.
Yes.
As they made their way back, however that was last night, was hang on a minute. Maybe there's been enough in that performance, as Simon's just said, that made Steve Parish think maybe we've got to give this guy a go. Perhaps he just woke up this morning and said, okay, I'm going to meet Frank de Boer and okay, it's done. Or maybe he wanted to see the colour, maybe he wanted to see the whites of his eyes. I don't know. These are all questions for Steve Parish.
Yes.
As always with journalists and the way that we report, it's always an interpretation of events. In the same way last night the 2 mics said, oh, I think he's staying, I think he's going. It's an interpretation of, and you just hope that more often than not that you're right. Unfortunately,
sure.
You accept that sometimes you get it wrong. So, you could argue the international break. Well, you said the guy was on the brink. Was he on the brink or not? Was Steve Parish the only person who realistically can answer that question? He's the guy who's just fired him.
The kind of received wisdom in English football is that you must give people a chance if they're going to improve football teams. But we also agree that if you see something isn't working, you have to get rid of it. Just on where do you stand on this? Take your own club allegiance out of it. Actually, are Palace doing the right thing right now in changing their manager?
I mean, it's ruthless, it's brutal, and it's decisive. There is no question about it. The guy has not had a chance. His vision. And we know all about the Ajax doctrine and the philosophy and the principles going back to Rinus Michels and Johan Cruyff. If you want to play total football in the Premier League and win every week 5-0, you'll actually win the Premier League title. Crystal Palace, and Simon is from the area. You know, Simon, what the culture of the club. Yeah, but let me finish. You know the culture of the club. You know what it's about. It's gritty. It's dogged and it's determined. That's what being a Palace. That's what being. Simon, hold on. Sorry, can I finish or not?
That's not true.
Can I finish or not?
Yeah,
Simon, we've just been talking about interpretation. That is my
interpretation.
You're talking
about my interpretation. And I'll come back at you and say that's fine. Not what it was.
Can you do it when I finish the sentence?
They were called the team of the 80s.
Can you do it when you finish the sentence?
Go ahead.
Yeah. But the club, in my view, is gritty, it's dogged and determined, and it's part of the sachet that Simon's going to talk about in the 70s and all that. But yeah, fine. The colour of Malcolm Allison, Terry Van Horst, you can go back to that. It's 40 years ago. But in their recent history, under Steve Coppell, under a succession of different managers, Steve Coppell that's Simon fired, Tony Pulis, Sam Allardyce, they have had a certain style of football that has kept them in the division. Under Sam Allardyce, Tony Pulis, and to an extent Alan Pardew. They have a way of playing, they have a culture, and they have a system, and it works. To flip that overnight is like flipping a coin and saying, okay, well, it was heads last week, we're going to make it tails this week. And you expect your players to suddenly make this transition from being hard to beat, a counter-attacking side, to this flowery side that you enjoy watching play, that plays breathtaking football, that dominates their opponents. That's not what... Crystal Palace cannot do that overnight. They just can't. No team can.
I don't necessarily think that's what Parish anticipated them to do. And your point about the fact that it's brutal, decisive and ruthless is nonsense. It's ill thought out, ill conceived and ignorant to employ a manager that wasn't capable of understanding the Premier League and then putting him in a position after 4 games, a bit like what Abramovich did with ABB, which was put a manager in there to break up a dressing room, knowing Patent wasn't capable of it, and then firing him for it. This guy was brought in to do a job. He was given an opportunity to do it, and 4 games in is not brutal and decisive. It's stupid. It's ill thought out from the get-go, and the guy should have gotten at least 10 games to be able to see whether he can change his culture, because you're right, to get an ocean liner to turn around, it takes a passage of time. But you've got to have an element of that time. And referring to how Palace played and what their DNA is, there were many DNAs that football club have had, whether it be under Steve Bruce in my tenure where they wanted to play a certain brand of football, whether it be under Steve Coppell's where they wanted to hook it forward, or whether it be under Malcolm Allison or Terry Venables. There isn't just one DNA, and Palace always had a reputation of being a little bit like the Far Show character, which is a little bit raw, a little bit way, a little bit soft underneath. So they're not a gritty football club, and I do know, because I'm the only one in this room that actually owned them.
You're not the only one who's watched them play over the last 40 years.
But I know more about the DNA than you do.
Can I ask a question? It's probably more directed at Simon than it is Neil. So in the summer, they've appointed Frank de Boer. At the time, we were led to believe Marco Silva was on the list. Sean Dyche was on the list. Was Roy Hodgson on the list then? And if he wasn't, why is he now the one that they're turning to, Roy Hodgson, and not saying, well, we'll pay the compensation and we'll go that extra yard to get Sean Dyche or Marco Silva out of the clubs they're at?
I wouldn't have thought it'd be easy to convince Sean Dyche given the start to the season that they've had.
Let me throw this hand grenade in then. I know somebody who must be unhappy in their current job, who's much happier at Crystal Palace, Steve Bruce. Anyone buying that?
Rafa Benitez?
Absolutely. I spoke to Steve about 18 months ago before he did the Aston Villa job and suggested and it sickens me to do it to certainly help Parish out, but I looked at Bruce and him needing to rebuild his career after Hull and thought Palace would be a great fit for him because I think he's a very good manager. And you look at the dynamics of it all, and Roy Hodgson, Parish has made a lot of good decisions. He's made a lot of good decisions, and some of them have fallen in his lap. Pulis, Pardew, and Allardyce are good decisions, right? He's made one bad decision, and everybody gets a pass. I made lots of bad decisions, right? And I'm held accountable for it. Parish has made a decision. Now, and it's interesting to see what Neil will think about this, whether Roy Hodgson has the chutzpah anymore, has the energy. We both know he's a Croydon lad. We've both seen him plenty of times at Selhurst Park, but has he got, because I believe a big part of the culture of a football club and the reason why Sam Allardyce was so successful was a fear culture that certain managers bring into their players, and I'm not sure Frank de Boer brought into the Palace players, and it'd be interesting to see what Neil thinks about Hodgson coming into the equation.
I think he's hurt. I think he's still the criticism, the way that his England reign ended. He had 3 tournaments. It's unprecedented to have 2012, okay, he was parachuted into that tournament at short notice because Capello quit the job just a couple of months before the actual tournament. 2014, England finished bottom of their group, they can't win a game. And 2016 at the Euros, they're beaten by Iceland. That's got to hurt the guy because he's got a reputation within the game, within boardrooms, of being a success. His work with Fulham, of course, Europa League final, took them to the Europa League final in 2010. Work with West Brom as well, he saved them. Hurt by the Liverpool experience as well, he'll be chastened from that. But he did so well at West Brom, and that's what got him the job.
And Fulham. It's much more evidence of short-termism in football, though, isn't it? Going for Roy Hodgson. He's 70 years of age. He'll come into the Premier League as the oldest manager in the Premier League. Arsene Wenger's 67. I mean, he's not there for the long term, is he? No one is for the long term anymore. Sam Allardyce was brought in as a fireman, put the fires out,
but they haven't
keep them up.
Do you think they've got a crisis at Palace, Neil? Because I don't think they've got a crisis. Crisis is needing 15 points out of the last five games. I think they've got a problem.
I think they fashioned themselves, Simon. Since 2012-13, they got promoted in 13, didn't they? In my eyes, that was an unexpected promotion. They weren't planning for promotion, but all of a sudden they gained momentum and they got promoted via the playoffs into the Premier League. You don't really know what to expect, what to anticipate. You haven't got the experience of it. New ownership structure in place. Didn't have that knowledge. And all of a sudden you're fighting your way to stay in the division, which they did under Tony Pulis, the succession of managers since. And you talk about a different DNA, and I accept there's been different ideas and ideology over the years, Simon. That's fine. That's all well and good. But I think if you take the last 4 years in isolation of all the rest of the Terry Venables and sashaying down the wing with Vince Hilaire in the 70s, if you take it in isolation over the last 4 years, yeah, we love Vince. If you take it in isolation, Palace players, they only really know one way, which is counter-attacking football, make themselves hard to beat and nick games 1-0. Sam Allardyce, I think Sam Allardyce, the performance against Arsenal last season when they won 3-0 against Arsenal at Selhurst Park, with the exception of the FA Cup semi-final win against Liverpool in 94-3, that performance and the execution of it was probably the best performance I've ever seen from a Crystal Palace side. You get a guy walks into the job who's got his history and his pedigree with Ajax and says, do you know what? I'm going to change all that. You think, hold on, they beat Liverpool away, Chelsea away, beat Arsenal 3-0 with one of the best.
It's foolish what he said.
What were you doing? Why did you do? Why didn't he walk into the club and say, okay, over time, I'm going to change this, but let's stick to the principles and the very rigid and dogged way of working.
One of the things you said is absolutely critical, all this, and we're seeing it each season. It becomes more and more obvious that the top 7 clubs in this country are so powerful, so financially well organised, that they are hoovering up more and more points. And I keep saying, and people won't listen to me, that from the moment you start the new season, every team who's not in that group of 7, perhaps it's 7 at the moment, I'm including Everton after their terrible performance at the weekend. Perhaps it's 7 at the moment. Their job is to get 40-odd points to make sure they stay in the Premier League by hook or by crook. Yep. We'll discuss next what exactly Palace have to do to make sure that they use their hook, their crook, and their new manager to stay in the Premier League, because everybody's in a relegation scrap until you've got those 37-odd points. You're listening to Kick Off with Simon Jordan, Matt Holland, Neil Ashton, and me, Danny Kelly, here on a Monday night on talkSPORT.
When you don't need an answer, you'll be days like this. When you don't need a chance, you'll be days like this. When you don't get the trade, by that old Judas kiss. And I must remember, there'll be days like this.